it's a funny sidetrack for Beau Jest because we've always done pretty much original work. We've tended to do original ensemble pieces. We start with a comic strip or a book. Or 3 or 4 years ago, we started working with Tennessee Wiiliams' experimental plays, and the first one that we did, we premiered the remarkable rooming house of Madame Lamont here. That was a real late Tennessee Wiiliams play, and that kind of got us interested in his experimental work. There was this one play I'd heard about for years called Camino Real. Camino Real, I thought, but it's actually Camino Real. He's very specific about that. He wants that flat Americanized sound to it. Maybe we could take a look at that, because it was actually, rather than one of his later works, it was written in his prime. It was written right after Glass Menagerie and while he was working on Streetcar Named Desire in New Orleans. So he was at his prime as a writer, interested even then in experimental work, and we got really interested in, well, why did this big production flop, and what is it about Tennessee as an experimental playwright that he was searching for that seemed somehow never to have been fulfilled. And I think in one sense of the word, it's because Broadway was the only option then. There really wasn't an off-Broadway scene. And he was really writing for a new kind of off-Broadway mentality of what he called plastic theater. He wanted a theater that could do what modern art was doing in the art world, getting expressionistic, just pointing towards passion and feeling with painting, with music, with dance, and he wanted to merge those elements on stage somehow into a kind of new form of theater, which he called plastic theater.
He picked up his guitar and he began to play.
Camino Real really came out of that impulse right after the war to continue with what O'Neill had done and Elmer Rice and Thornton Wilder with really pushing the boundaries of American theater into some kind of new, probably closer to what was happening in Europe and what ended up happening here and what you see now with Meyerhold's influence and companies like Complicité and Mabou Mines and these great kind of very theatrical, full-bodied pieces of work in which language poetry is just one element of many elements. And I asked David Kaplan, who runs the Provincetown Festival, who hired us for a couple of seasons to do these other shorter Tennessee Wiiliams pieces. And he said, the 10-block version is just published, you should take a look at it. And I did, and I loved it. It's elegant, it's mysterious, it doesn't try to explain itself, and it's written in these 10 vignettes, 10 sort of, each block is kind of a little diorama of a story or an image or an element, and they link up in this very interesting kind of, it's like a Coney Island of the mind place. You're not really sure. He's very clear that it's not a specific time and place, but sort of almost like a Twilight Zone episode of a place where people go, artists go, everybody in it's fictional, they're all characters, Casanova, Camille, Don Quixote, and even Kilroy, who's the main character, is a fictional character. He's the guy all the GIs had been writing. Kilroy was here, and he thought it would sort of be fun to take this kind of universal American icon as a main character. And so that was the original 10-block version, and I loved it. I thought, well, this could be our next project, because it's really like a spoken word piece. And in the script it says, use music, use dance, use more than is indicated in the script. Just don't let it slow down the progress of the scenes. If the early version of Camino had been a hit, not just his own writing, but other writers would have gone a certain route. I think it would have earlier on started what became the off-Broadway movement. And instead, because the Actors Studio was sort of influential, and those early hits like Streetcar were so big, and Brando became so big, and then the movie versions of them became so big, that kind of locked experimental theater out for a while, and naturalism and that sort of 50s realism and Arthur Miller, and that really sort of locked in as the new direction. And so some of the earlier expressionistic stuff disappeared for a while. At one point, Tennessee wrote to Kazan, if you dissolve the shimmer of the mystery of this thing, it will lose its fascination. And he meant it to be ambiguous. And the more they tried to nail down the plot and give it a certain kind of realistic thread, the more trouble they got in. And Kazan admitted afterwards the set was too realistic. The early versions were much more sort of painted and open-ended, and that's where we've tried to cue our interpretation with a sort of flexible, interactive set where screens can move and roll and do different things. And yet at the same time, he's got images like violets breaking through the mountains in the distance. So, well, let's do it. How are we going to do the violets? And for me, I love puzzles, so I like to think about how can we solve each one of these. And sometimes the solution's musical, sometimes it's a prop, sometimes it's a mask or a puppet. So to have that full toolkit available, that was one of our goals. And early on, being Beau Jest, we knew there had to be some sort of ensemble dance or movement sequence, and there's a point towards the end where the main Kilroy, the hero, dies, and then he's resurrected, and when he comes back to life, the gypsy's daughter just sees a cat, so it's sort of like reincarnated. All she sees is a cat, and she says, "Go away, cat," and he's like, "I'm here, I'm back, I want you." And she's like, "Cat, go away." And it's like, okay, so is that a shadow puppet? Is that such a cool image that wherever he goes, she sees a cat? And then he's surrounded by what in the script Tennessee says spectral figures doing a spectral ballet. I'm like, skeleton dance, right off the bat, my brain leaps to the early 30s cartoons with the skeleton dances with Ub Urix and Max Fleischer. And so I called Don, our composer, and I said, "Don, that spectral dance again, shouldn't that be like a skeleton? It's Day of the Dead too. There's this sort of Day of the Dead overlay to the whole piece, and that's perfect with skeletons." And Don's like, "Oh yeah, I'm working on that. I think I got a piece for you." And he sends me the piece. It's like he reads our mind perfectly. So we have this sort of spectral dance, which echoes the Fiesta festival dance that they had earlier in the evening, only now everybody's dead. So that was when we started working on that, we thought, wow, and Larry Cohen, who's one of our actors, he was a little reticent because he'd read the script and it didn't quite hang together in terms of a narrative plot. He said, you gotta, I don't want to be just like wearing sombreros and speaking with a bad Mexican accent here, And he was involved in another show at the time, and so we worked for a couple of weeks on it. We came up with the skeleton dance, and we started working on some opening sequences, and realized how much this is actually set in America and Chicago and in people's, there's an exotic sensibility to it, but that's more for the romantic in him, not specifically to be about Mexico. And Larry came one night and we did this skeleton dance, we showed him a couple other things. He said, "That's a Camino Real I want to be a part of." And we said, yeah. And since then, everybody, the musicians, the actors have been contributing ideas, and each night we sort of solve another little nugget or find another little piece to flesh out a little further.
Oh, it's fantastic. That's right.